Hello, COM 110 students. We're going to be taking a look at Chapter 7 this week. And Chapter 7 deals with emotions, but more importantly, emotional messages. So let's start out by talking about the principles of emotions and emotional messages. So the first thing that we want to talk about is emotional communication is really what we're focused on. A message that is emotional is part of emotional communication. And there's been a trend just in the late 90s to the mid 2000s that came out called emotional intelligence. And there was even a book written that allowed you to take a quiz to see how emotionally intelligent you were. And it's also referred to as social intelligence. And what this means is how good are you at using your emotions to make decisions, to connect with other people, and just to live your daily life. Because it's impossible for us to communicate without including our emotions. If we were to communicate and leave our emotions totally out of it, some of the meaning would be missed. That's why you'll see oftentimes when I'm giving you feedback or sending you a response via email or via Canvas chat, I will put emoticons. Why do I do that? Because I want you to know how I feel about what's happening, not just the information. And it's very important to me. Because we can't meet face to face, you still need to know emotionally where we can connect and how we connect, or how I feel about you, or how I feel about what's being said. And sometimes I use it because I don't want you to take it the wrong way or take it to be harsh, when really I'm probably just giving you a little bit of a hard time, but it's not that big of a deal. So that's really what we're focused on, and I want you to constantly be asking yourself throughout your review of Chapter 7 is, how emotionally intelligent am I? And hopefully some of these tips will help you, and understanding some of the principles will also help you. So the first thing we're going to look at is that emotions can be primary or blended. And the primary emotions are rather simple: joy, trust, fear, surprise, sadness, disgust, anger, and anticipation. And if you look in your book on page 175, you'll see figure 7.1 is a model of what they call the emotional wheel. And so this emotional wheel, I want to make clear to you that in bold, you see those primary emotions: joy, trust, fear, surprise, sadness, disgust, anger, and anticipation. Now, if we look at joy, let's look right there. If you see on that petal, or I'm going to call this a petal because I think it's more like a flower than it is a wheel these days, that petal where joy is in the middle, ecstasy is extreme joy. Serenity is a milder form of joy. So when you look at that, serenity, joy, and ecstasy, that's all the same emotion of joy. So those are all the primary emotions, joy. Serenity is just a lower form of joy, where ecstasy is an extreme form of joy. So those are not the primary, those are not the blended emotions. Those are just different degrees of the primary emotion, joy. But if you look to the right of joy, you'll see there in the white between the yellow and the green petal, you see love. You'll see that love is actually a blend of joy and trust. That's the blend. If we look to the left of joy, we see that optimism is a blend between the primary emotions, joy, and anticipation. So that's kind of how that model works. And I think that it's helpful for you for two reasons. One is it shows you that there are a variety of emotions that you should experience, and when you realize you experience them, you should communicate them appropriately. So you shouldn't always say that you are terrified. Sometimes you could say that you're fearful, and other times I hope you say, oh, I'm kind of apprehensive. You should have the emotional intelligence to use a varied vernacular, so a varied number of the terms on this wheel. If you're always telling people that you're angry, that may not be accurate for how you're feeling, and then they're going to say to you, you're angry all the time. The reason why they're saying that is because you're telling them you're angry all the time. Sometimes it may be helpful for you to say, I'm getting quite annoyed right now. You're not angry yet. And it's important for you to know that there are a variety of terms and to use those terms. So that's the first thing I think is helpful. The second thing is that when you try to understand your feelings before you communicate them to other people, you should look at this or remember this model so that you can effectively explain when you do have blended emotions, to explain to the other person, these are the two emotions that I'm experiencing, and that's why I'm having a hard time communicating. So primary or blended emotions can be either. The next is emotions are influenced by body, mind, and culture. And on page 174, you see 3 different models of how we understand body, mind, and culture to be influenced. The first is the body. That means your body reacts to certain emotions that you have. So you may be sweating, you may blush. Those are your body's responses to the emotion. The mind is how you cognitively experience the emotion. So you evaluate and you interpret your experience, and then you may assign an emotion to that. So that's the mind aspect, is how you evaluate or think about how you're feeling. And then the culture is, the culture you were raised in allows you to express certain emotions and not others. For example, in China, there would be times when students would listen absolutely quietly, very politely. They would not answer any questions. They would not make any comments. If I were to be in a classroom like that, my first thought would be like, oh my gosh, they are so bored and uninterested, I don't know what to do. But if somebody were to come to me and say, you know, they would never be disrespectful by asking a question or making a comment while you were speaking, that's going to help me understand, oh, culturally, emotions can be prohibited. You cannot communicate that. For example, in the Middle East, it would be very odd for a female, a wife of a Middle Eastern man, to express jealousy. That's not something that's allowed. A man may be jealous, but a woman may not, in some of the more, I would say, older generations.